Welcome to VPAT training, module 8. This module sums up modules 1 through 3, and we're attempting in module 8, ACR readers and evaluators, to stitch together all the pieces that will come together in these modules. And once again, I'll start out with just a definition. ACR stands for Accessibility Conformance Report. And this is a completed VPAT template. So when you have a VPAT template that's empty, it's just the VPAT. When you fill it out and it becomes a report, it's an ACR. Now, this is a summation slide of modules 1 through 8. And in this series, we are attempting to educate the reader and evaluator of the ACRs. And our purpose in doing this is so that when you get an ACR and when you are potentially about to bid on a product or purchase a product for a particular group of people, the ACR is going to tell you the accessibility of the product, software, document that you're going to purchase. And so it's just really important that you take your due diligence to learn what these reports are about, how they're structured, which version you have, that type of thing. And so this series is for that purpose. And this particular video is to you, the purchaser, to you, the person who's going to read the VPAT and evaluate the VPAT in order to become more educated on the accessibility of a product. Okay, there are some things, and again, this is the whole goal of Module 8, so I'm not going to attempt to completely educate you right here about the whole goal of this module. There are many slides that I'll be going through, but the goal of this module is after you complete this module, after you watch this video, you have a better idea of what you as the reader and evaluator should look for and what content you should be looking for when you receive an ACR about, again, that's been reported on for a specific product that you intend to purchase. Okay, we have some steps here for you. You should determine the standard that you need the report to be tested against. There are many different versions of the ITI VPAT 2.4R, and different places in the world, different internal company standards, different government standards will maybe require you to have a different report that was turned in. So we're going to talk in step 1 about the determination of which standard should have been used. Then in step 2, was the correct VPAT template used? And we'll try to educate you on that so that you kind of know the VPAT template versioning and what the different words mean in the, and numbers might mean in the title. And then when you're looking at the version, you may need to ask the company that supplied the ACR to give you a different one. That's perfectly within your rights to do. And they have different content. And so it would be reasonable to ask a company for just the one that you need, again, for your purchase, for your agency or company's population. You know, you have certain people that are going to be using this using this product, and you want to make sure that it works for them. Your step 4 is always going to be to look at what testing was performed. A lot of companies incorrectly assume that if they run an automated tool, for example, that that's enough, and it may not be enough. And so please look at what testing was performed, and we'll talk about that. Step 5 is also related to testing, but it talks about the different type of testing, and we try to define a few different ways that accessibility testing is conducted, and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and when, again, you should reject the report. Step 6 is to look at what exactly you're purchasing. Many products are complicated, and they might have a software operating system, and they might have a piece of hardware, and they might even have some firmware. They might have some documentation. There might be a web and a locally installed component, and each different product in a suite of, a suite that composes one larger purchase, they may have different ACRs. Sometimes they're all in one. Sometimes you need multiple ACRs. Sometimes the ACRs are across different companies. And so step 6 is for you to determine, do I have everything I need, again, to assess the accessibility of this product I would like to purchase. Step 7, we go a little bit into the criteria, and step 8 is similar, and it involves reading the success criteria tables. So the reports are divided up in some sections into tables, and we'll discuss that as well. Once again, and I'll keep saying this, when you purchase, you have the power at that time to ask for what you need to assess whether a product is accessible for your use case. And so knowing what the use case is, knowing who might be using the application is really critical. And then again, this module, just to sum it up one more time, this module is for you as an ACR reader and evaluator to make sure you have all the information that you need to make a really quality educated purchase for your agency or department. What standard is needed? So step 1, determine the standard needed. WCAG is measured both by version and level. WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It applies to web. It applies to other things. It applies to locally installed software. It applies to documentation and support services. And so those standards are important to become familiar with because they cross a lot of different platforms. The version is numeric. So you'll have a WCAG. It usually is called WCAG. And this is a bit of a tomato. We have that saying, do you call it tomato? Do you call it tomato? A lot of different people say different things for WCAG. Some people say WCAG. Some people say WCAG. Some people say WCAG, and all of it is okay. So the versioning number is numeric. 2.0, 2.1, 2.2 is about to be released. I hear sometime in the future, but the level is alphabetical. So you start with A, and then we say AA, AAA. WCAG is cumulative. So it's almost like a pyramid, but the base A level is more basic, more foundational, more fundamental, and you must meet level A. As you go up the pyramid toward the point of the pyramid, you get more specific for the base is very, very broad. It affects a lot of different disability groups. It affects a lot of different people. When you go to AA and then AAA, you get more specific. For example, a AAA standard is a sign language interpreter, and that would be focused on a deaf or hard of hearing individual that knows ACL. So you see that's very specific, whereas an A might be keyboard support, which is very broad. A lot of different users would need keyboard only navigation. WCAG 2.1 level AA is the most common sort of benchmark standard worldwide. Now, the next slide is going to talk about, was the correct VPAT template used? And so we'll get into a little bit more detail about that next. Okay, step 2, you just need to look at the cover page, the title page of your report, of your ACR, and you need to determine if what was turned in by the company who's selling you the product, did they use the right VPAT template for your needs? There are 4 different VPAT template editions available on ITI's VPAT website right now. Okay, so you can have WCAG, and the WCAG version only contains WCAG criteria. Section, and that would predominantly be for software, but you can determine that whatever you're purchasing. If that's what they send you, you can look that over. The 508 contains section 508 criteria, which includes WCAG level 2.0 or WCAG 2.0 level AA. This is interesting because the US section 508 law will stay on WCAG 2.0 even as WCAG 2.1 and 2.2, whatever other versions of WCAG come out. In the US, those reports only include WCAG 2.0 at this time. It takes a rulemaking to update it, and it'll be a little bit of a longer process before the US updates theirs. If you're very concerned about a certain criteria that happens in WCAG 2.1, then you need to ask also for a WCAG report. So you see kind of what we're doing here. When we say make sure you get the correct VPAT template, it's because different templates that then become ACRs, that then become reports, have different information in them. And it's up to you as the reader or the evaluator to look at this and make sure you have the information you need, again, for your population that you're advocating for as you're making a purchase. And so that's just something to know. And the revised section 508 will not change. And when it does change, we'll all know, because the rulemaking process takes some time, and they send out, some announcements, and then a certain amount of time goes by before the US can update that. The EU, right now, it contains a version of EN 301549. Again, this gets updated occasionally. And so right now it includes WCAG 2.1 level AA. It includes a lot of other content as well. They're called clauses. And so if you're purchasing something and you are a European company, or you are a global company that has European concerns, it's very much within your purview to request an EN 301549 report. The international report, and you can see on the table here, there's a table that lists, which criteria is included for each version, and then what works for different locations in the world and different sectors within that location. For example, US government, public sector might be different than the private sector might want. And so you can evaluate that. The international version contains all of the information included in the other 3 report editions. It's very long when completed, but it's excellent if you need, if you need all the information, you could request an international version. Step 2 in this process is, was the correct VPAT template used? And this is the second of 2 slides on this topic. Now, this is to let you know that just because ITI came out with a new version of the VPAT template, it doesn't mean that the criteria in the ACR changed. And I know that this is a lot of information and this slide has a lot of information, but you could pause the video and take a screenshot or look at the ITI's website and get a copy of this, because if someone were to turn in an old version, you might want to request a newer version. But if the criteria didn't change, for example, from April of 2019 to February of 2020, the criteria didn't change. So the content is essentially synchronous. And so you don't need a new VPAT at that point. But if somebody sends you in something from October of 2017, you definitely might need a new version. So this table is to help you assess when you receive the VPAT, is it the version that I needed? Step 3, this has to do with the product that you're purchasing and the product versioning of that. So you get an ACR, you're looking at the ACR, you want to have enough information, again on the title page of the ACR, to know that the product that you have a report for is the same product that you're purchasing. And if it seems questionable, you need to ask your resource for clarifications, and you may need to ask for an updated ACR. We have some more about this. Again, this is kind of will be continued in the next slide, but I want to pause here for a second and let you feel empowered. As the ACR reader and the ACR evaluator, you are the advocate for your purchasing, sort of the population behind what you're purchasing this ICT product for. And you need enough information that you can determine that. And so we'll go through some steps right now about how to determine if the report you got is the right one. Okay, so this would be when to ask for an updated ACR. We have some conditions and some analysis that I'm going to go through that might help you to determine, yes, this works and it's fine, and this is exactly the information I need to make this educated purchase. Or you might, it might be obvious after this that you do need to request an updated ACR. Okay, so companies release things, they release products with a version. If your ACR does not contain a version, you need to request information about what version it is. And so if you have a version number that has something in the tens place, that's a whole number, so like 3.5 is in our example, and they send you an ACR for a release 3.5.1, when the difference is in the, further down is in the hundreds column, and it, the whole integer at the beginning, the whole number, the 3 is the same, and then the dot version, like the .5, the dot in the tens place, if those two are the same, you're probably okay. But you want to confirm with the vendor. So I'm going to go ahead and read the analysis. Chances are that a minor release, which is what this is called when it's in the 100th place or beyond, it probably does not contain substantial user interface changes. So the current ACR is probably accurate. Confirm with the vendor. Now, if you're a product expert, I mean, you may do a lot of purchasing, and you may know, you may be on the advisory council for this product, and you may know a lot about it. So of course, use your best judgment, and you don't need to contact the vendor if you know. But if you're questionable and it's in the hundreds column, usually you're okay. But now the next condition is a totally different situation. The ACR is for version 3.5 and the release to be installed is version 4.0. No, major releases typically have new features and a modified UI. The ACR for version 3.5 may not be up to date, and you definitely need to ask for a new one to validate that this is still accurate. If they don't have 4.0 yet, you can ask a lot of good questions because this would be a significant product change. Our next condition is that the ACR is for version 3.5 and the software is software as a service. It's a SaaS product. Okay, SaaS operates differently than other types of software updates, and SaaS code updates like all day long, every day, and it can update even a dozen times a day. So you just want to ask questions like, how long ago was this tested? You can look at the date of the VPAT. If it's more than 4 to 6 months old, you may have some significant UI changes. You may have new features, new pages that have been introduced, and you may need a new version. So this is again a case where you have to ask questions because 3.5 may not mean what 3.5 did 6 months ago. The next condition is the ACR is for version 3.5 and the software is a native app. Okay, native app that like for mobile, for your mobile device, are they generally updated? There could be a window one too, but a native app, they're generally updated once every couple weeks. Like SaaS, you have to question, how long ago was this version of the ACR tested and what is the current version? How old is it? Is it more than 4 to 6 months old? Has the UI had significant changes? Have you introduced any new features? That's a question that you could ask. And then ask for a new test, ask for a new validation or some kind of, input that this is accurate. Okay, one thing that you always want to be mindful of and you always want to question is what kind of testing was performed during the process of completing the ACR. In the on the title page, there is an evaluation methods used section. In this section, you should get details about what type of accessibility testing was done on the product. You can also look in the notes section. The notes may also have information for you as the evaluator or the reader of the VPAT. Okay, it should include something like if an outside vendor was used to do the testing and which one. And then you can also look for, was the product tested with users with disabilities? That's a good thing to question. And if the evaluation methods used section or the notes section is blank, especially the evaluation methods used section of that title page, you should ask about that. Okay, there are various types of testing for accessibility. We have better and better and wonderful examples of automated testing, and they're good. There's a lot of good automated tests happening right now. You also should look for manual testing, whether the manual testing was tool assisted manual testing, whether there was a visual inspection, whether there was manual operational testing. Also, assistive technology testing, for example, a screen reader, was that done by a person without a disability? What testing was done by a person with a disability? Okay, and then we have a warning, a dramatic red exclamation point. Any ACR that does not identify manual testing or that assistive technology was used in testing should raise red flags. We know in the industry And if you don't know, here's your education. Automated testing alone is not enough. Continuing with this theme of the kinds of testing performed, automated testing can only identify, on a good day, 29% of accessibility violations. Now, this number can be much less than that, and it rarely could be a little more than that. But if you use only automated testing and then you make a report about it, you are missing up to 80%, 75% of the errors. And that can be a real barrier for a user with a disability. If this is the only kind of testing done by a vendor, the ACR will not be. The ACR is not accurate. Manual testing is critical. You must test the keyboard only with no mouse. You can enhance this testing with some tools. That's just fine. It's common, for example, to use a screen reader and the tab key. So you go through your keyboard, you go through the screen reader, and you see if they're synchronous. That's fine. But you have to visually check that everything can be reached and that everything can be used. Here's an example. An automated tool can find that you have alt text, but it can't tell you if the alt text is meaningful and describes the non-text content. And so it just doesn't work. So assistive technology testing includes, that's a good thing to read about also in that evaluation methods used. Was it tested with a screen reader, with a screen magnifier, with voice recognition, with switch devices, etc. So you just want to be mindful of how the vendor was testing for accessibility in the product as they were reporting. Okay, now again, I alluded to this at the beginning, but step 6 in this process is to assess if you have all the ACRs you need. For example, one company may not report on another company's accessibility. So if you have a product that has a lot of integrated parts, which a lot of things do, then you need to just make sure there's the possibility that a product could integrate a combination of subproducts. So your product could be a hardware product that has software. Again, could have a manual, could have information on the web that integrates, definitely could have a mobile application or two that work together. So your report may be for just one component of a larger set, or it's like subset of a set, and it will often not list the accessibility defects in the subproducts. So you won't know the accessibility of the software because you got a hardware VPAT and the software is from another company. So determine if the ACR lists other ACRs, including from other vendors, to find all the issues with the product. And in these cases, it's to assess the complete accessibility of the product, and then just collect other ACRs that are relied on to make a completely informed determination of how accessible the product is. A lot of companies have these on their website, and so it's just a matter of due diligence. It doesn't, a lot of times, if it's a widely used operating system, for example, the VPAT is pretty easy to assess and to access. And so you can get it, you can look at it, and then you can just make sure that it'll work for the users, again, that you're evaluating the VPATs for. Okay, step 7 is to know what criteria are needed. And every single product, every single piece of hardware, software, mobile app, just everything has accessibility defects. It's a myth. It's a commonly asked question. Is this certified WCAG AA accessible? If something says that, let's really have a reality check, as the slide says, it's probably not true. Commonly, people who don't understand accessibility ask for a certification, and they also ask if it's fully accessible. If we think about the population that we're reading and evaluating these VPATs for, it's a wide variety of disability groups, and they have very different needs. And it's just very unlikely to impossible for all defects to have been eliminated from a product. So what you need to ask and what you need to know is, what criteria are the most relevant to the needs of your users and or of you, of your department, of your people. If you have a large population with a certain type of disability, then you really need to look at those criteria that are listed. And so there is a link that has mapping of WCAG 2.0 to functional performance criteria on section 508.gov that you can use. This can help you quickly disqualify vendors that don't meet these minimal levels of accessibility, and it can also help you disqualify maybe certain products. I guess the vendor and the product would be kind of synchronous, but you could look at that. You know, if this version of what I need is very inaccessible to this population, then you probably can't purchase it. And that's really what your job is as a VPAT reader and evaluator to start with. So if you need the functional or some kind of the functional performance criteria, the functional needs it's just kind of a summation of how it works. And so you can request that. Okay, step 8 is reading the success criteria tables. So these tables always include the conformance level, and then they have a section of remarks and explanations. So they'll say supports, partially supports, does not support, not applicable. That's the conformance level. But then if they answer not applicable, if they answer and I'm going to start over. So I'll wait a second. The conformance level tells you the level of success or the level that the product you are wanting to purchase achieved in the accessibility test. So the conformance level might be supports, partially supports, does not support, or not applicable. Remarks and explanation explain why that level was chosen. And so look to find remarks and explanations for anything that partially supports or does not support. You always want to start with the level A criteria that apply to your needs and look at that level first. For again, the AA criteria, you can look and see how it did. And it may be for a specific population that you don't, that this particular defect would not affect anyone in your particular office, and so that's okay. So always when you're reading and evaluating these reports, just determine if the defects found in the report will impact the users that you're advocating for. Okay, how to stay up to date, how to stay informed. ITI's VPAT webpage is https://www.ACIC.org/POLICY/ACCESSIBILITY/VPAT. And you can go to that URL. That's where the new versions will be. That's where you can find out the tracking changes for the latest updates. There is updates online, of course, for the WCAG Accessibility Guidelines Working Group. That is found at www.w3.org/WAI/GL/project, PROJECT. And so it's www.w3.org/WAI//PROJECT. You can find updates to EN 301549. You can sign in for alerts when a new version of EN 301549 is available. And if you have questions or feedback, please write us at info@itic.org, and that's INFO at the @ itic.org, or we have a telephone number, which is +1 -202 -737 -8888. ITI would like to thank you for your time, for your commitment to accessibility, and for your advocacy on behalf of customers and all users everywhere. Thank you.